Hello, my name is Ankur, and I am a PhD student at UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And I'm excited to talk to you today about probabilistic detection of atmospheric rivers across climate data sets with neural networks. I wanted to thank my research advisors at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and UC Berkeley, as well as collaborators at the Atmospheric River Tracking Method Intercomparison Project, or ARTMIP for short. First, atmospheric rivers are long, narrow columns of moisture that transport water vapor from the tropics to the mid-latitudes. They're responsible for much of the precipitation on the West Coast, including alleviating drought or causing floods. As neural networks and machine learning are used more broadly in physical sciences and climate science specifically, we proposed 3 criteria that neural networks must meet in order to ensure that neural networks are rigorously deepening our understanding of the atmosphere and climate system. These 3 criteria are: first, neural networks should represent uncertainty across different existing AR detection algorithms. Second, they should detect the same AR structure in different data sets and fields. And third and finally, current AR detection algorithms are based on thresholds chosen by experts. Neural networks should learn the deeper patterns of atmospheric rivers and should not be learning to replicate a threshold. First, let's look at the first criteria that we identified to ensure that neural networks are deepening our understanding of the truth about the climate system, which is that they're able to replicate uncertainty. In this figure, we can see that the input to the neural network, integrated vapor transport, is being mapped to the likelihood that an atmospheric river exists at a given location. Here, the convolutional neural network, or CNN, is trained on the mean of 14 detection algorithms. So a 0 represents 0 of 14 algorithms identifying an atmospheric river, and a 1 represents all of them identifying an atmospheric river at a location. Crucially, this field is continuous from 0 to 1. We show that neural networks first extract low-dimensional features. A low-dimensional feature is a concise representation of the input integrated vapor transport field and successfully matches that to the probabilistic identification of an atmospheric river. Next, let's move on to the second criteria, which is how to extend the neural network to detect the same AR structure in multiple climate data sets. For this criteria, we had to identify 2 new machine learning techniques in order to successfully meet the criteria. First is perceptual loss functions. Now, a traditional loss function evaluates a neural network by comparing its predictions to the truth from the 14 existing detection algorithms. This comparison is done grid cell by grid cell. A perceptual loss function does the same comparison, but it operates on the features of the predictions and the features of the truth. As we talked about previously, a feature is a low-dimensional representation of the input. And so by removing the grid cell by grid cell comparison and instead operating on a low-dimensional representation of the input, perceptual loss enables learning and reducing noise and improving performance as a result. Here's a figure explaining how a perceptual loss function works. The input is an integrated vapor transport field, and the atmospheric river detection neural network first learns to identify atmospheric rivers that closely match those of the label. In this case, the label is the mean of the 14 detection algorithms from the Atmospheric River Tracking Method Intercomparison Project. But now, crucially, these predictions aren't compared to the label grid cell by grid cell. Rather, there's another neural network that learns to extract the features from both the prediction and the label, and these features are compared. Now, while these features are lower dimensional, they aren't interpretable to a human or to a physical climate scientist, but they are an efficient representation of both the label and the prediction. On this slide, we show that the benefits of perceptual loss functions are substantial. So on the left, we have the labels, which are the 14 detection algorithms from the atmosphere from ArtMIP. In the middle, we show a neural network trained with perceptual loss. And on the right, we show a neural network trained without it. Clearly, the right shows that the neural network is over-detecting and over-predicting atmospheric rivers, and the results are consistently too high. However, the middle shows that the atmospheric river detections are much more correct in the sense that they much more closely resemble the truth from ArtMIP. On the second criteria of detecting atmospheric rivers across data sets, we also want to make the problem harder. Let's say we want to identify atmospheric rivers in a new data set, which does not have ArtMIP labels with the neural network. For example, on the bottom left, we have the integrated vapor transport field from CAM5, which is a future climate model simulation. If we just use a neural network that's trained out of the box on the existing data set of ArtMIP labels on reanalysis data product, the neural network does not generalize well. The bottom right shows that the neural network detections are consistently too low, and it almost completely misses ARs off the coast of Chile and Argentina. To resolve this problem of getting a neural network trained on one data set to work on another data set, we introduce style transfer. So style transfer takes a content image, let's say a photo of the Painted Ladies, a landmark in San Francisco, and converts it into the style, let's say Starry Night, which is a painting by Vincent van Gogh. This method learns how to convert the content image into the style of the style image. So the rightmost image is the Painted Ladies of San Francisco, but shown of the style of the Starry Night painting. We adopt the exact same method, but for climate. So now our content image is the CNN outputs on CAM5. And as we mentioned earlier, these CNN outputs are consistently too low. And we train them to match the style of data that we do have, of data sets that we do have labels for. So in this case, we use the ArtMIP labels from the reanalysis data product, which is ERA interim to be precise. Using this style transfer method, we can see that the neural network detections are much higher as a result, and they much more closely represent and match the style of ArtMIP labels that we expect to see. And this is shown in the rightmost figure on this slide. The detection probabilities now match the style of the ArtMIP labels. This style transfer method is crucial because we do not, for the purpose of this exercise, have labels for the CAM5 climate model simulation. So we have to instead match the style of the detections to the style of data sets that we do have labels for. Here is bringing the last two topics together, where we have some data set that has some data sets that do have labels and some data sets that don't have labels. For the data sets that do have labels, we compare the truth to the predictions and compare them through perceptual loss functions. And for the data sets that don't have labels, we use style transfer, where even though we don't have a set of labels for that specific image or that specific time step, we do have labels for another data product, and then we compare the style of the data set without labels to the style of the data set with labels. Finally, let's bring this all together and show how atmospheric river detections can be used to detect ARs in different data sets. So here we show that atmospheric rivers can detect, neural networks can detect atmospheric rivers in integrated water vapor, in satellite data, and in integrated vapor transport. And regardless of the input field, the detections are roughly constant. Here is a video illustrating how these detections vary across time. The left is a deep learning prediction based off precipitable water, and the right is a deep learning prediction based off of integrated vapor transport. Clearly, the uncertainty for precipitable water is higher, especially in the tropics, but the areas of high confidence roughly match regardless of the input field. Finally, let's move on to the final category of using neural networks in climate science, which is that neural networks should not replicate absolute thresholds, because existing algorithms use absolute thresholds. To test this hypothesis, we show in a variety of training data sets how the neural network performance changes if we perturb the input fields by a factor ranging from 0.92 to 1.8. In each of these whisker plots, box and whisker plots, we show that the neural network performance remains roughly constant, changing only by around 3 to 10% based off the data set, meaning that the network isn't just running an underlying threshold under the hood. This is also particularly relevant for one of the long-term research goals presented in the white paper, which is about the documentation of observed extremes and comparing that to simulated extremes of atmospheric rivers. If we are able to create a neural network that is a generalized detector, regardless of the input field and regardless of the input data set, whether that's a climate model or reanalysis, a neural network could be a great tool to get a consistent atmospheric river detection across different data sets, and thus developed a comprehensive catalog of atmospheric rivers in historical reanalyses and future climate simulations. Thank you.